Joining us now is Qanta Ahmed, who has just returned from Israel. Qanta, tell us what you saw and what life is like there in Israel. You were there when Sinwar met his maker down below. Tell us all about it.
In fact, I just got back to the States, so I heard the news about Sinwar, as you did, from the comforts of my home. It's a remarkable nation under an extraordinary degree of pressure. I was able to meet field commanders of the Southern Command, the Northern Command out in the field. I was able to meet very senior leaders in the Israeli Defense Forces right at the apex. I stayed with an Israeli family, and with them, I sheltered in bomb shelters. There was the Iranian missile assault just as my plane was flying into Tel Aviv. So I was really able to understand how this society is living. The courage that these people show, that's a picture that you're showing of me on the Egypt-Sinai-Israel border, is extraordinary. And it's a story that's not been told. Unfortunately, there have been 10,000 soldiers wounded since this conflict started. Over almost 780 soldiers killed, but more civilians have lost their life in this conflict since October 7th began. Some of the medical responses to the wounded soldiers have been extraordinary. I had a chance to visit the Ichilov, which is the Tel Aviv Sorovsky Medical Center, and meet with Dr. Eyal Hashavia, chief of trauma surgery. They're now bringing wounded soldiers from the battlefield where they receive whole blood within 15 minutes to a helipad in central Tel Aviv. 2.5 minutes later, then they're in the operating room, and they have halved the fatality rates for these badly wounded soldiers, many of whom get better and want to go back to war. But perhaps the most important thing that I understood is not that Israel has dismantled Hamas. You saw the elimination of Yahya Sinwar, very symbolic. Israel has obviously dismantled most of the command of Hezbollah and now has Iran in its crosshairs. What we don't understand in the West is that this obsession of radical Islam, Iranian Islamist jihadism with Israel, is just a waypoint in their own concept of a century-long war against our civilization. And the West, the United States, Britain, Europe, is yet to wake up. A great example of this, they're having the G7 summit in Italy at the moment, where the American Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, is speaking about this conflict. Yet the West has completely rescinded control of the Red Sea. And that has strangled the Italians' economy by almost 30%. Egypt requires a huge amount of revenue from Suez, which it's not getting. So the West is not defending international assets against jihadists. When pirates imperil Red Sea, we were quite comfortable to defend it. But confronted with radical Islam, we're not. And so while I'm very confident Israel will continue to secure its sovereign borders, it has responded in a way that probably no other nation could do so, and very definitively. I think that it's time that we understand we are already in the middle of a transnational, multi-front regional war that has global ramifications.
Rita.
Well, this multi-front regional war, Iran is at the heart of it. It funds Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, a bunch of terror groups. How do you see the next stage of this war and what Israel will do to respond to Iran's missile assault? Will they hit those nuclear targets?
So I think you said it exactly, Rita. The next stage in this is the Israeli response. I do believe Iran will be heavily targeted by Israel. I suspect, I have no basis for knowing anything specific, but I suspect that both the energy installations, Iran operates mostly out of one port. 90% of Iranian petroleum goes to China, but it's only 10% of China's needs. I think Israel will target that. And Israel will do its best to dismantle components or perhaps the entirety of the nuclear architecture of Iran, which it needs U.S. munitions and collaboration with. So I do think that's happening. I suspect it's going to happen before the election. And if there is some poetry to the kind of justice that Israel deserves, Iran has imperiled the entire region, not just Israel. then that strike will probably happen on the anniversary on the Jewish calendar of October 7th, which is Simchat Torah, the holiday where Jewish people observe completing reading the Torah. And that's around October 25th. That's my guess. Now, both Republicans and Democrats are going to try and claim political capital from that strike. Kamala Harris will try and... Yes, sorry, please.
I was going to say, but how can the Democrats claim any political capital from that strike when the Biden-Harris administration has been consistently two-faced? They told Israel, do not go into Rafah, which is, of course, where many hostages were and where Sinwar was ultimately found. In the last few hours, there has been news of a document leak that's shown up on Telegram of Israeli documents that were marked Five Eyes only. It seems to me that the White House at the moment has a very conflicted attitude when it comes to taking the fight to Iran.
Yes, I completely agree with you, and I'm glad you mentioned the document leak, which is very shocking. It means that there are some pro-Iran or pro-Islamist individuals who are disseminating that kind of information. I believe the information is describing exercises, military exercises Israel may be undertaking in preparation for a strike back. The current administration is desperately trying to win an election, so I think all bets are off, and they will spin anything they can, whether or not it's based in reality. The Republicans also, who have shown very much stauncher support for Israel throughout this, though they aren't in the position of responsibility for governing at the moment, will see it as a win for themselves. What I think both parties are going to face, let's say we have a new president after the election, is that this conflict is now, I see it going on not only for years, but potentially over decades. And we in the West have not definitively confronted this. Iran is not only the number one consumer of Russian military strategy, the number one exporter of military extremism around the world. It has also completely shackled oil-rich federal Iraq, where Hashd al-Shaabi, the Shia Iranian army, is actually more heavily armed and more powerful than the Iraqi army. So if we dismantle the crown jewels of Iran, we now are faced with what are we going to do about Iraq? And then don't forget Lebanon. Everyone is circling Lebanon, whereas Israel has quite appropriately gone after Hezbollah and now is in a ground invasion. You can see France taking this bizarre position of offering to negotiate with Iran on Lebanon's behalf, denying Lebanese sovereignty, which was astonishing. And at the same time, Recep Erdogan in Turkey is also trying to insert himself and come to Lebanon's defense to defeat the Zionist enemy. So Lebanon is extremely vulnerable and needs to be strengthened now that Hezbollah potentially could be peeled away from this. So
Qanta, Qanta, I've got to jump in there. Dr. Qanta Ahmed, always great to see you. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Great to chat to you as always and get your insights there.